I'm Tammy Dunnett, ex-target workplace bully turned communication coach. But it wasn't that long ago when I lacked the skills, the tools, and the knowledge to ditch the drama, confidently handle difficult conversations, and create better relationships. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you will see the business that I have today. One that is helping others just like you to find the confidence and peace knowing you can change your circumstances one conversation at a time. I created the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit to give you access to industry leaders who are sharing simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies so you can do the same. If you are an employee, supervisor, or an employer and you are looking to access the top strategies to successfully dissolve conflict without damaging your relationships, then you, my friend, are in the right place.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the summit. And today I am hosting the interview. My name is Trina Serecchia, and we are turning the tables on Tammy Dunnett. Our host, Tammy Dunnett, has shared some really powerful interviews with us and has been a voice for years in dealing with and reducing workplace conflict. All right. And so Tammy is a workplace communication coach on a mission to change the way relationships are done, one conversation at a time. She integrates her own experience as an ex-target of workplace bullying with her research in lateral violence in the workplace and role as an emergency room and ICU nurse in her programs. Tammy has mastered the art of care-centered conversations through caring for people at their most challenging times, both locally and abroad, in places like Haiti and Afghanistan. Wow. And she is committed to helping employees, managers, and supervisors do the same. Tammy, I am really excited to interview you. Welcome.
Thanks. It's interesting to be on the other side after all of these interviews I've completed, but I'm excited to share my story as well.
So tell me, what got you started with workplace bullying? How did you get involved in this?
Well, I can tell you, growing up as a little kid, I thought I was going to be a country music singer. That was my goal. And workplace bullying and conflict resolution was nowhere on my radar, except for having to deal with the odd playground kind of bully situation. I didn't think this was going to be my path, but fate had other plans. And I ended up being in a really difficult conversation with a supervisor, and we were entangled for 4 years. It was a job I couldn't just leave. So this was in the military. You can't just say I'm quitting and leave because you go to jail. So I had to stay and I had to navigate or try to navigate this relationship. And I was doing what I thought was right. And this is what I've learned a lot of people do is we tend to have one or two ways of dealing with conflict because we just aren't taught it growing up. We kind of learn it by chance. And if you get lucky, you get lucky, but you don't even really know what worked half the time. And so I was entangled with the supervisor for 4 years, back and forth. I was fighting, she was fighting to be right, and neither of us had the right tool set. I ended up becoming extremely sick, diagnosed with anxiety and panic. So I went from being afraid to see her and have interactions with her to being afraid to be in the building, and I was scanning the parking lot, and then I was scanning the block, and eventually I wasn't even leaving my home anymore. I got so afraid because she was on my phone, she was in my email, everywhere I went she was. And the story I kept telling myself was that I was a victim, and I didn't seem to have the right tools, and I ended up getting really sick as a result. But I couldn't just leave that place, right? So what I found out in my journey is there was only two answers to workplace bullying. And I find that's the same today. And this is part of why I'm so passionate about it. There's the medical model and the organizational model. And I was searching for an interpersonal model. I knew the answer had to be between us, but I couldn't get it. I was asking for it. Others didn't know, and it's not to their fault because, as I said earlier, we're just not taught this. And so they would give me their best solution. And I was still doing what I thought was working, and it wasn't. So as a result, I ended up having to use the medical model. So stress leave, counseling, medications for sleep, anxiety, that kind of thing. But it wasn't solving my problem. It was
just a Band-Aid.
It was just a Band-Aid. Yeah. And, no fault to them. And the organizational model, well, their idea was to separate us, which gives me a reprieve, but it was about me learning how to be a better employee. It wasn't addressing the interpersonal problem. And so, long story short, once I went through my recovery and I started to realize what I brought to that situation,
Hmm.
I started to realize there were gaps in my own communication tool set, and ended up finding myself in another bully-like situation when I went to a new job. I often say that people think that leaving is healing, but if you don't do the work, there's no healing. And the lesson will continue to show and present in your life until you figure out what it is that you need to fix and you need to do. So that's how I got here. Fate put me on this path.
I love that. And there's also a sense of like you can't outrun your problems. You can't just change the setting because wherever you go, there you are. And with each new level, there is a new devil. So I love that you experienced that you found that, and you, instead of looking outside of yourself to fix the bullying experience, you looked within.
Yeah. And what's really ironic, I'm going to tell you like the next piece to that, because without this next job, I still probably wouldn't be where I am today. So I
Mm,
did leave eventually. I recovered, I healed, and I left on good terms. I didn't leave bitter. And then the next job I had was teaching in a large nursing program. And I was given the course, I didn't get to pick, I was given the course communication skills. Now, I'll be honest, my first semester through, I thought, what kind of a, like, I'm such a fraud. I just went through 4 years of hell and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm going to teach these new nurses how to figure it out. I felt like I was a fraud and I wasn't capable of teaching this course. What I learned is that it was exactly where I needed to be, because as I learned the material and taught the material, I was getting all these awakening moments going, holy crap, that was where I could have done something different. Oh, I could have tried this strategy. No one's ever taught me this. And so with every successive course that I taught, I got better. I saw different results. And then at the same time, I was studying my master's in nursing, and that's where I was researching lateral violence. So I just kind of put all three together, and the results have been amazing now that I've got this process.
oh, that is brilliant. And I got goosebumps as you were explaining your progress, how you progressed through from feeling like a fraud to like, this is what I need to be doing. Um, because sometimes how we learn something is by teaching it to somebody else. And we get such a deeper understanding of it. And you get to bring that gift to the people that you work with, Tammy. So you are in the right place. You are so needed here.
Thank you.
So, and it looks like you've created a brand new model between the organizational and the medical. You're creating the interpersonal model,
Mhm.
and that is where the power is.
Yes. Yes, that is absolutely where the power is. That's not only where the power is, that's where the answers are.
Yes.
And so, um, when I was teaching communication skills, I'll just talk about first the traditional five. Like people talk about those five dominant responses to conflict: the avoider, the accommodator, the indirect, the assertive, and the aggressive. And those are great labels and they help us understand things. But what I've come to understand is a lot of people feel like that's a destination.
Mm,
That if they're an avoider, they will always be an avoider. And what I dislike about those terms is that says you lack the capacity to change, but also that you lack the desire to change. And I think that's completely false, because I've worked with many people who would say and define themselves as avoiders, and which I will say we go through all of those.
yes.
We have a dominant tendency when we have that emotional reaction. And I want to get people into interactions as opposed to reactions. And so we all have a dominant style. And depending on the context, you can find yourself in any one of those areas. But what I have found with working with people who say they're classic avoiders, it is not that they don't desire the conflict to be resolved. They absolutely want a resolution because it's uncomfortable enough that they are pushing themselves away from others and from being authentic. They just don't know how.
Mm,
They don't know how to say that, hey, that actually sounds a little bit off-putting to me and I'm uncomfortable with that. Can we change the language? Or, when you rolled your eyes and huffed the other day when we were working together, that made me feel less than. And I don't know if that was your intention. So can we talk about that? They just don't know how to have those conversations. And so they choose to sit in their own discomfort and displeasure because nobody has taught them. It's as if we've said, you're not capable. And I
yes.
just don't believe that. So for me, in my model, I call them my pausers. They're the ones who need time. They're the ones who need a different resource than somebody who's a speaker, for example, which is typically my dominant. I'm a talker. Let's figure this out. So
Yep.
I'm the polar opposite of a pauser. I don't want to take time. I want to talk about it now. And so we can actually cause conflict by those styles. And what I know to be true is that everybody wants a resolution. It's just how do we get there is the difference.
How do we get there? And are we willing to make the internal changes within ourselves, within our conditioned, habitual, and subconscious behaviors that this is how we learn to do it, probably from a very young age. And these are the only tools that we have available to us that we're aware of. And when you only have a hammer, all of the problems look like a nail. And so you deal with the problems the same way. And what I love about how you're describing your program and the work that you do is that you're giving people a more useful toolbox. You're helping them become aware of the tools that they have available to them that they can choose to use. And
Mhm.
you're supporting them along the way so that they can make those better choices. Because it's hard to change behaviors.
Yeah, I didn't want to change. I spent 4 years stuck in this battle with my boss because I was right and I was going to make her see that. And I didn't want to change. I didn't want to say that I had anything wrong in that situation, but I did. And it was only when I actually stepped into that moment of self awareness and self exploration that I could see that, in fact, I wasn't always right. I was fighting to be seen and to be valued and to be heard. And those were fueling my belief that I was right.
Mm.
But they're not necessarily the same thing. And so we have to be able to dissect the situation, to understand what is it our goal is, where are our values, what are our boundaries, what are we going to like allow and not allow, and how do we talk about that in a way that actually doesn't hurt the relationship.
I love that you mentioned being seen, heard, recognized, acknowledged, because we need to do that for ourselves first before we can actually feel that coming from someone else.
Mm.
And it sounds like this is part of the work that you do as well. So
Mhm.
really looking into ourselves and acknowledging ourselves, validating our own selves.
Yeah.
Um, Not saying I'm right all the time, but how do I feel? What are my values? How is this bringing me forward? How is this serving me?
Yes. Yeah. There's multiple ways that we can enter into these conversations. And I mean, I'll just ask for those who are listening right now, just think about how you act when you're at home with your family, how you act when, if you go to church, maybe on Sunday with your fellows there, how do you act when you're with your grandparents? In each of those interpersonal relationships, your value sets shift. The priority is different. Maybe with your closest friends, you might be willing to cuss and just be very authentic as to who you are and be goofy. But with your grandparents around, that is low down on your priority, and you're more about being proper and respectful. And so our values continually shift. So it's no surprise that in the workplace, we also have these shifting values and these faces that we want to show, and it can cause some tension.
Yes. And when you talk about values, you have your set of values. The
Mhm.
person that you're in a state of conflict with has their state of values. And the conflict is really coming from when those values clash. Um, and there's a secret third set of values, that of the organization itself within the workplace.
Yeah.
So
And the
that's
more we're
brilliant.
aligned, so if we talk about workplace for a second and values, the more we're aligned with the workplace, the more we adopt their values as our own. We become one. When you start to feel disconnected, devalued, not seen, not heard, you start to distance yourself from the values of the organization and you start to get rooted in the values that you feel are missing and lacking. And this will cause a gap. And this will be a place of conflict within your colleagues, within your supervisors, and your leadership team.
That's brilliant. It seems like you have so much to offer, not just for individuals who are experiencing conflict, but also for organizations who are really committed to reducing the amount of conflict, to increasing engagement in their businesses, in their employees. Um, and so just beautiful work that you're doing
Thanks.
can help so many different levels, both the individual who is committed to their own experience within conflict, as well as organizational.
Yeah. And we all have that responsibility. I think sometimes I've done it as well as an employee. I would look to my employer to be responsible to create a safe workplace. But I also have that same responsibility to create a safe workplace. And I didn't know that back then. I felt like I was right and justified and that they needed to do what I asked them to do. So there has to be that self awareness and that awakening. And within an organization, I think what is great is they often have these policies, workplace of respect, and in there it outlines what your individual roles are, and we kind of forget that we have that responsibility too. So I would encourage everyone to go back and look at them and say, what is my job here?
Mm,
Just how do I contribute to this overall value? Because we all value respect and it looks different for each of us, but how am I contributing to that today? What does it look like for me? And do I understand what it looks like for Trina?
yes.
Maybe Trina is value set is about being on time and my value set is about coming in late and being the show. And, where does our value set disconnect and where do we align?
That's brilliant. Now, when we were talking offline, and we've known each other for a while, you've guested on my podcast. You have pillars
Mhm.
within your program.
Yeah.
Tell us about those.
Yeah, actually, they're very much aligned with my values. So, my three values that I like to live on are caring, curiosity, and connection. There's probably a deep root to my nursing background with those values being the prominent ones because of the places that I've been with people. I mean, I've had people yell at me, I've had patients spit on me, I've had some pretty crazy things happen. But at the root of that, I was never allowed professionally to react. I always needed to
Mm,
interact. And so I had to have a quick shift. And I could tell when I was being launched off of my island onto the reaction, and I had to find ways to come back. So, what I've discovered as well with working with others and going through my own journey is there's four things that are essential. And the four pillars are confidence, curiosity, conversation, and collaboration. We tend to individually be pretty good in a couple of those areas and lacking in a few others. And if I could just touch on confidence for a quick minute, because I know this isn't a long session that we have, but confidence tends to be looked at as shoulders back, head high. You come in, you kind of claim your space in a room. But that's not everything confidence is. And
mm,
confidence isn't always that. Sometimes confidence is the quiet, the softness. If you think of all your relationships, I've held the hand of a dying person. I was confident in my ability to be with that person, but I wasn't in this power pose. I was comfortable with them. I was quiet with them. I would cry with them. Confidence is knowing you're in the right place and that your values are leading you and that that connection can be made through that. So I think confidence gets this kind of stereotypical image of what it should look like, but it shifts depending on who we're with, what we need to get out of that relationship, how we're going to serve that relationship. It will shift how we present our confidence. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that because a lot of the conversations I have are about, you know, take your stand, be powerful, speak up, and all that's important, but it has to be within the right context.
One of the things that I love about the topic of confidence, I won't go very deeply into it, but confidence is being less focused inward on your own experience and self protective, and more open and aware and focused on the other, being aware of them. It's like, I know I can trust myself to respond in a way that is healthy. And here I am holding this space for the other person within this interaction.
Yeah, right. And that comes from so many different places. It's knowing that, I mean, my core values are caring, connection, curiosity, knowing that those are broad. There's so many behaviors that go into each one of those value sets, and how they look for me is different. But that doesn't mean that they have to be the dominant ones. I can put those down and I can bring up another value or a virtue, as some people call them, right? Just knowing who you are, what you want, what you stand for, what you believe. Like, I believe wholeheartedly that the interpersonal problems require an interpersonal solution. And that's why I'm in the trenches with people. That's why I'm in here helping others to figure out their processes and what they're missing in those four pillars so that they don't have to go down the road I went through. Like I went through 4 years of hell, many years of recovery. I got the t-shirt and the t-shirt is not worth it. I'm going to
No,
tell you.
it's not.
So don't worry about the t-shirt. Let's get you fixed up ahead of time.
Yeah, so well, that's why we do what we do. We've gone through it, we've experienced it, and we want to help people get out of it
Hmm.
and prevent further
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah. One of the ways we find ourselves in conflict is that we don't actually get into the curious stage. So
Yes.
confidence is one of the pillars. Curiosity is another. And it's so important because we tend to do really good at getting 3/4 of the way there, meaning that we have selected the data, we have interpreted the data, and we've organized it into our own meaning. And that's where we stop. And we
Mm,
go right past curiosity, right into either conversation, which is like my doers, and we're solving problems or we're telling people what they need to do. And we skipped a major step, and that is to really negotiate. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. Do I have it right? And so many times the conflict resolves. I'll give you an example. And this just popped into my head. When I was teaching, I used to have a student that would come into class every day late. And to be honest, when I first started teaching, my definition of respect was that they showed up on time. But I learned over the time having conversations that my definition of respect wasn't being dismissed by a student who was coming in late. They had a different priority. And so this one student kept coming in late. These are all adults. And students were starting to complain to me. They were coming to me and saying, hey, it's really disruptive when this person comes in late. We find it disrespectful. That was their value. And it was starting to cause tension between the two. When I actually sat and talked with the student, I said, hey, I noticed you come in at 8:20 every day. Class starts at 8. Are you having troubles getting here on time? Is there something I need to know about? And she shared with me, I have to take my child to daycare. I get up at 5 a.m. I get on a bus at whatever time and I take them over to one side of the city. Then I have to get another bus to come here. And this is the earliest I can get here. That's the curious stage. I could have just looked at her and judged her based on my value of you're 20 minutes late. And for me, 15 minutes early is on time, right? And so I'm thinking disrespectful, doesn't know how to manage time, doesn't care about it, her colleagues, all these things that we label somebody. But when I got curious and I sat down and had a conversation, and she shared with me that she's actually more than willing to be here on time, but she physically cannot based on her circumstances. And she still comes anyway because she knows that even though someone might feel disrespected, she values the content she's getting and she wants to be here for her own future. What a shift in perspective. And so when we could share that with the class, she gave permission for me to share that when people came to complain, not like as a global announcement, but just as if someone were to come to me. That softened their judgment. That reduced any tension in that relationship. And then they became more supportive as a result. So that
oh, that's
curiosity
beautiful.
stage, the curiosity stage is super important and is often where conflicts can be resolved quickly. Emotions shift on a dime when you get more information.
I love that. And respect is such a huge aspect of conflict because usually we're not feeling respected in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And you took the step with your curiosity to show a very deep respect. We have to give respect to receive respect. We
Yeah.
can't demand respect without providing a certain level of respect
Yes.
first.
That's a mutual thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. So that's the
And
second
then,
stage. Yeah. So confidence, curiosity, conversation. Obviously, one of the things people struggle with is how do I say things? What do I say? When do I say it? So that's a big piece that I work with people is, how to say things in a way that is disarming to begin with. That's not going to generally result in a blaming response back. And then collaboration is you got to go full circle. Once you've had the conversation, there's a result. And both of you would need to be committed to it and feeling that movement forward. And so those are the four pieces in carrying conversations that are in my program, the four pillars that we work through.
it's beautiful. I love the collaboration because it's not just one person experiencing the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
There are at least two people involved in a
Always.
conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether you're expecting it or anticipating it, or it comes upon you. You didn't see it coming. All of a sudden you're in this conflict. The two people are dependent. The resolution is dependent on both people in it, intended or not to be, but there are people in it and they all need to be involved in the resolution and the way forward.
That's brilliant. So Tammy,
True.
what's next?
What's next? Well, obviously, I can't say the summit because we're at the tail end of the summit. We are closing out the summit together, you and I, my friend. And so, what is coming up next is we're going to be continuing to build this program, continuing to work with employers and supervisors and leaders in order to prevent themselves from being called a bully in the workplace. So, we know that stats show that supervisors are at a high risk group to be called a bully. We also know that most people don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I screw this person over today? There is
Yeah.
the difference between a bad day, bully-like behaviors, and a true bully. Now, personally, when people come to me and say they're being bullied, I don't take offense to that term because one, I was in it, but two, what it tells me, their capacity is overrun and they're not sure what their next step is and they're feeling really uncomfortable. That's what I take that term to be. Yes, it's a big word to throw out there. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a bad day or a bully like behavior. And when we look at bully behaviors, just so you know, we all do them. Not one of us is immune to acting like a behavior set that can come across, as a bully. I've had people tell me that I'm a bully and I have to look and go, what am I doing? And if they're willing enough to have a conversation with me, I can understand it. If they're not, it's difficult because I feel like I don't get closure, but I can still do some self-reflection and I can still ask for feedback from others. Um, Now, with that bullying behavior in the workplace, when we can actually dissect it, this is where I like to work. This is where I want to help supervisors and leaders, is to prevent them from ever having to go through the emotional experience of being called a bully. Because then what happens is the workplace will separate you. You may not get resolution. You may not get opportunity to come back and revisit and say, hey, like, I don't understand what I did. Can you help me? But it does require two people to be involved. And so that's where I work. That's what I want to do, change the world.
That's brilliant, Tammy. And I can see you doing it already, creating this amazing summit, doing the work that is so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. I know it's working.
Yeah.
I don't want to be boastful, but I know it makes changes. And I hear it all the time from people that I work with, how just sometimes it's a small thing that they need to look at. And sometimes it's a longer project. It's amazing, truly, how much we are reducing the tensions and improving people's health.
Because you're not just improving health, you're improving relationships at work. And also, I can only imagine relationships at home as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because when people don't leave their stress, their conflicting feelings, their anxiousness at work.
No.
They also live at home. They also have spouses. They also have significant others or children or family members or friends.
Yeah, no, they absolutely bring it home with them. And that's often where they try to resolve it, is at home with other people who aren't involved. And part of that resolution is getting the stink off you, as I call it. Like, you need to sometimes release it. It's how you do it makes a difference. You don't want to be wearing on the relationships at home and wearing on the relationships at work, because you're going to find yourself really lonely. But you're right, they do bring it home. And how can they have those conversations? So if you haven't caught Kyle Benson's interview, watch that, because he actually is an intentionally intimate relationship coach, and he teaches people how to have conversations with their family, with their lovers. But he talks about how to have a stress reducing conversation to get the stink off from work so that you don't have it impacting your home life. And that's really important.
Yes. And so that's why I love the work that you do, because it doesn't just affect one area of your clients' lives.
Mm-hmm. It's far
You know,
reach.
it's far reaching. When you improve one area of your life, like your business relationships, it affects your health.
Mm-hmm.
It affects your relationships at home with friends and family. It reduces your stress level. Your mind becomes clear because it's not clouded with stress and anxiety and worrying about Monday
That's right.
or
Yeah.
the next day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So imagine what that would feel like. We've all been there. I mean, I've
Absolutely.
had the night before dread. I've had the Friday before Monday dread,
Mhm.
where the whole weekend was spent worrying about walking in on Monday. And, it's an incredible lifestyle downer. It sucks the joy out of you. You can't enjoy the rest of your life, the other things that you do. Um, and so just imagine when you resolve those conflicts, or you have a process that you can do that in a healthy manner that respects both your needs and the other party's needs,
Mhm.
then automatically your health improves. Automatically, your other home, outside of work, non-work relationships improve,
Mhm.
and people probably start seeing you in a different light.
Mhm.
They know that something has changed, but they may not be able to put their finger on it.
And I love that you said that change piece because when you show up different, they have no alternative but to react differently.
Hmm.
It may not be the reaction you want, and you have to let go of that expectation of how things will go. And that's really hard to do. Like even
Yeah.
myself, I will go into a conversation thinking, okay, I got it. I nailed it. I've considered this, 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 and I've got my great opening, and I think it's going to go great. And it goes sideways. So you have to release attachment to the outcome and just be present in the moment and learn at every corner as you go through it as to what's working, what's not working, what's working, what's not working. That came out so fast. And so actually what I wanted to share quick, because I know we're at the end of our time here, is what I want to give people, what I want to gift the attendees with today is I have safe conversation starters. This is often a place of angst for people. It's like, well, what do I say? I don't even know how to start this. And so aside from confidence and curiosity and all those pieces that are important, I want to give you a tool that you can start to use right now that will help you to set some boundaries if something has been broken. So, for example, if someone is gossiping and you happen to be in the room with them, what can I say that would not make them uncomfortable and that would not make me uncomfortable, but would also stop the behavior that I'm finding offensive? And so I've got a download that's called Safe Conversational Starters. They can pick that up and start to look at that and carry it around with you if you need to refer to it. Many times I've walked away from a conversation going, oh man, I should have said. It is always okay to go back and circle back and say, hey guys, when this was happening, this is what I was thinking. It's always okay to circle back and start to build that muscle, that communication muscle as you work through this. So I want to give that to people so they can get started today.
Such a wonderful gift. And it sounds like it's something small that they can keep with them very easily.
Yeah, and they're not difficult phrases to say. You don't have to memorize a ton. Actually, I have a wallet-sized card that I keep with me because sometimes I'm like, where'd that come from? I haven't experienced this for a while, and maybe I need to like brush up on what I'm going to say here before I intervene. So it's always good to take a moment and say, hey, give me a second. Quickly look at your list and come back and say X, Y, Z. Right?
I love that. Yes, we've all had experiences where we've walked away from a conversation. It's like, oh, that, you have like
Yes.
the perfect comeback line or the perfect thing to say, and it feels
Yeah.
like it's too late, but it's never too late.
No, you can always come back and make an old relationship, an old conversation better by revisiting it. And you can reclaim your boundaries in that too, right? So if they're gossiping and you say, hey, I don't think that's really fair, maybe you should talk to that person about your issues. Often people be like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you a quick story and then we'll have to end. I know. I was on the bus and two ladies sitting beside me were talking about the cleaner at their workplace and how they should go back to where they came from. I found this extremely offensive on many fronts. And as the bus was nearing its stop, I had a little bit of time because it's, it's a little bit of a drive to its first stop. I was thinking about all the things I wanted to say, how I could say it, how it might be received, but I knew time was not on my side. And as the bus was coming up, and I'm like starting to get really nervous because we're coming up this hill and I'm getting really nervous. But it's so important to think about your words sometimes. I got permission from them first. I leaned over and I said, hey guys, would it be okay if I say something? And they both said yes. And I shared how I had been listening to their conversation And I pointed out that those are the types of conversations that keep racism alive, and that if they really felt like this is a conversation they need to have, they should probably consider having it in a public place where they could, work through these pieces themselves, but to really consider how their words were impacting. And then I sat there and my breath was like, what are they going to do? Oh my God. I was like freaking out, but the bus was about to stop and I was praying they were getting off. They didn't get off at that stop, but they did say, you're right. I was like so pleased at their response because it could have gone sideways, but I knew it was important that was a boundary. It was offensive. It was uncalled for. It doesn't need to happen anymore. And if we don't collectively stand up in those moments, like that's a hard moment. This is why I share this one, because that's a hard moment. And sometimes people are afraid to just tell their colleague, hey, you're talking a little too much. I'm trying to get my work done here. And they don't know how to have that conversation. And so in every hard moment, know what your value is, know what your boundary is, know where your confidence resides. I was confident in my belief set, and I was confident that I could choose words that would be less defense arousing, and I was hopeful it would go my way. And in that case, I got lucky. So that's what the safe conversation starters can do for you, is they can help you give that confidence that your value is correct, where you are is okay, and these are the words that are going to help you to talk about it.
And not to confuse the different pillars, but the courage that you showed, doing something when you're afraid.
Yes.
Because you know it's the right thing to do, and standing up for your own values.
Yes, confidence and courage.
Because I know that there are more people out there like that who, when they hear these conversations, they're horrified.
Yeah.
And they feel like they need to say something, but they're afraid to say something. And the only way that the conflict of racism will resolve is when we have more conversations like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that is another powerful tool that you're sharing. You're not just improving employees' lives. You're not just improving the corporate environment, but you're also improving society by enabling people to have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's needed. This is the time.
Tammy, thank you so much for being interviewed, sitting on the other side of the table.
I'm delighted you got to guest.
Absolute honor.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Thanks, Trina.
Thank you.
And that's an official wrap on this session of the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit Speaker Series. Now be sure to connect with your favorite speakers by clicking on the link below and taking advantage of the free resources that they are sharing with you so that you can dissolve your conflict without damaging your relationships. Now be sure to head on over into the Facebook group Dissolving Workplace Conflict and give us your favorite takeaways from today's session using the hashtag Dissolve Workplace Conflict. I can't wait to see what you've learned.